Hey everyone, welcome back. So, July 8th, 2026 marked the 7-year anniversary of me receiving this tiny house on wheels. Wow, I cannot believe, well, actually, in some ways it feels like I've always lived here. And in other ways, it feels like just yesterday that I first started living in the tiny house. So today I wanted to take a trip down memory lane, look back at some footage of the day that I drove to Lethbridge from Calgary to escort her home, and maybe do a little, recap of what it's been like living in my tiny house on wheels named Serendipity. So on July 8th, 2019, as I said, I drove to Lethbridge to follow Serendipity down the highway and to Calgary. I had been there the week before to do the final walkthrough with my builder, Jen McCarthy of Teacup Tiny Homes in Lethbridge, Alberta. And that was obviously an incredible day because I got to see her finished for the first time, meet some of the tradespeople that worked on the tiny house, and just get all the information I needed about her systems and all of that. And so the next week, the next Saturday, I drove down. And I gotta tell you, going from years of dreaming and planning and envisioning and sort of manifesting this dream to the day when you actually see your tiny house move for the first time is an incredible journey. And while I knew it was going to happen, I knew it was possible, I knew I was making it happen, until you actually see her move, at least for me, it just didn't feel real. But watching her be pulled out of the shop, because Serendipity was built inside a shop at Teacup, and then watching her get pulled out of the shop, that was the first number one stressful moment of that day. Even though I know there was obviously when they built it, they knew there would be plenty of clearance to get her out of the shop. It just, from down on the ground at a distance, it looked like there was like this much space between the peak of the tiny house and the opening, the top of the opening of the door. And it was very nerve-wracking. And Jen had said, maybe you don't want to watch this. And I'm like, no, I want to watch this and I want to video it. And I'm really glad I did, but it was nerve-wracking, especially when he first pulled out, because when he pulled out, he had to go right to get out of the yard, but he had to pull the house all the way out and then back and sort of go back and forth until he had enough clearance to turn and get the house around. And that took some doing, and it took some directing by Jen and one of the other people there to just sort of make that happen. And that was the most nerve-wracking part, I think, for me, certainly for Jen. I think she was very, very stressed out by that. But Serendipity came out, and it worked out just fine. It was a wonderful thing to see her out in the sunlight and hooked up to the truck and ready to go.
He did it! Woo!
You know, I knew she was big, but in that moment I realized just how big of a tiny house I had built, which is why my channel is called My Big Tiny House Life. I didn't set out to build the smallest tiny house. I set out to build my forever tiny house that would meet all of my needs. She's big. Now, she's no bigger than a lot of motorhomes or RVs that you see being pulled down the road. Maybe a tiny bit wider, but not by much. Certainly no taller, and I've seen plenty of RVs, motorhomes, and fifth wheels that are just as long, if not longer, being pulled. Obviously, she's a lot heavier than an RV because she's wood framed versus, you know, fiberglass and such, and metal framing like an RV is. So we got on the highway, and I followed her down the highway, and it was fun to watch because I was behind her. It was fun to watch the people in the fast lane drive by and slow down to have a look at this tiny house that was being moved down the highway. In those days, I don't think tiny homes were as mainstream as they are now, though I still think that a tiny house being pulled down the road is something that people will slow down and look at, take pictures of. There were a lot of people, a lot of passengers with their phones out filming. We got to Calgary safely and to the mobile home park where I had found a spot for her, and she got backed in.
1, 2, 3, and...
Now, one of the first hiccups that we ran into after she got to the mobile home park in Calgary was that my plumber couldn't connect the sewer line for the toilet because I had a flush toilet at that time. So for the gray and black water, because the tiny house was still on its tires and there wasn't the proper angle, and he needed it blocked up to its final height before he could do that. And I gotta admit, I hadn't thought of that. This was my first time. So I called around and found somebody who would come and block it up the next day, and he could come back and do it. But this person couldn't go and get the materials. So I had to go get the materials. And the park sort of maintenance fellow, Tony, when I was telling him this, that I had to go and pick up the materials, and he said, well, how are you going to get them from Home Depot here? And I said, well, I guess I'll rent a pickup and stuff. He goes, well, you can take my pickup. Can you drive my pickup? And I'm like, sure. Luckily, it wasn't a standard. So he said, sure, okay, take it. So we hopped in his pickup, Jenny and I, my best friend Jenny, who had met me at the spot. And we went to Home Depot. I had a list of exactly what I needed. I bought all the blocking materials, brought them back. By the time we were back, they had taken the tires off and put them underneath the trailer. They'd taken the hitch part off, and it was underneath the trailer. So it was ready for skirting and ready for the sewer connection. And the next day, the fellow came to block it up. And my handyman that I had hired, Seth, who also lived in the park, he helped me so much in my years in Calgary. He built my skirting, he built the shed underneath the gooseneck, he built my front step. He was just my go-to. He helped us when we were disassembling everything and getting the house ready to move when I left Calgary. Get yourself a good handy person. Shortly after I moved in, obviously the pandemonium happened and we were all working from home and there was lockdown and all of those things. Being in the tiny house was just like my sanctuary. As an introvert, I love being at home anyways, but because I had been so careful in the design, because I had thought through everything that I needed, because I had made sure to build an office space and a nice big kitchen, a living room area, I had everything that I needed, and I felt really comfortable and secure during some pretty uncertain times. During that time, I will say having the washer dryer combo unit, especially at a time like that, was incredible, because I don't even remember if the laundromats were open. I had always planned to live in the tiny house on Vancouver Island. I built it for a humid climate, which is why the sheathing is plywood, not OSB, much more moisture resistant, and why the majority of windows, every window that open that could be, is an awning window that goes out so that I could have them open when it was raining. A couple of them had to be to code egress, so there's a slider up in the loft, and one of the windows of the bedroom had to open slightly differently just for code. But I always planned on being on Vancouver Island. The pandemonium slowed that process down a little bit because, of course, everything was on lockdown for a while and everything was very uncertain. And even though I did make a couple of trips out to the island to look at potential spots, it really didn't feel like the right time. And I delayed my move probably 2 years longer than I would have originally planned or hoped. But eventually we got here, and she moved the second time. And this time she moved over the Rocky Mountains and across the ocean to Vancouver Island and to her first spot here. The first spot that I had here on Vancouver Island was kind of between Duncan and Chemainus, and it was a spot that was built, kind of custom built for Serendipity on a young couple's property, and they had wanted to have a tenant to help them financially. They had 4 young children, and so they cleared some land at the end of their property, and they built a really nicely built pad. They had electrical brought in, and I liked my neighbors. I didn't have any problems with the neighbors that I met, but I didn't meet them all. And it turned out one on the other side of my landlord's was the kind of fellow that all of the other neighbors would roll their eyes at, because he complained about everything. And he complained about the tiny house. And so the bylaw officer came and said the house had to move. So I started looking for another spot, and I had, I think, 5 that were in contention, 4 or 5 that I was seriously looking at. Ended up choosing this one. And this property is awesome. It's a former, like, actual campground with an RV area and down at the river spots. It's no longer a campground, though down in the campground area, there are campers that come in the summer. They only stay for the summer because that is a floodplain in the winter, and it will flood at least once with the heavy rains and the high water of the river. Most of the people down there are people that have been coming for years and years and years for the summers, or my landlord's family members, extended family. They have their spots down there. And the rest are in the RV section, there's RVs of people that have been there for years. And then we have the little tiny house section where we are. And it is such a great spot. It's quiet, it's beautiful, it's green and lush. There's a lot of wildlife. I'll tell you a story about that that happened recently in a second. And it feels like home. And when I look back, I think it was a very good thing that Dick, which is the name of the fellow who complained, and I had to move Serendipity, because while it was very stressful and expensive to have my mover that come back and move me here and, take off all the skirting, re-put in all the skirting and the shed and all that stuff, this is a much better spot. In the original spot, maybe I would have gotten to know my neighbors well enough, but they weren't that close. And here, the ladies around here, my neighbors, they're amazing. They're my friends now. Even though we're introverts, we still enjoy doing things, especially going for walks and such together. And it's just really nice to have that community. And this does feel very much like a little tiny house community. Also on this property, there are laundry facilities, showers if you need them, and it just feels, the ocean's much closer than it was in my first spot. You still have to drive to it, but it's a much shorter drive. And it's about the same distance time-wise to get to town to get groceries. It's maybe 5 minutes less when I was driving to Duncan to get my groceries than here to go to Courtney or Campbell River. Also, Keaton is now here on this property. He has a 5th wheel trailer that he's living in, and he's just one over for me. There would have been no space for him on the first property. But I feel bad for the young couple, obviously, because they had invested a fair amount in getting that lot ready for a tiny house. And so I wasn't even in that previous spot a year. We got there at either the end of August or beginning of September, and by the following June, or end of June, I believe, or early July, I had moved here. Now, like I said, one of the things I love about this location is that there's a lot of wildlife. I often see deer wandering through the little glade here while I'm working at my desk. There's a lot of eagles, bald eagles, and tons of birds, things like that. And there are also cougars that wander around. I've never seen one, but there's a lot of people who mention them on the Facebook groups. And there are bears. And a couple weeks ago, I came face to face with one. Now, I haven't been face to face with a bear since I lived in the Northwest Territories. It has, that when I lived in a small town, mining town in the north, bears would wander into town. They'd sometimes get into the garbage and such, and you would see them. And I've come pretty much face to face with a bear a couple of times on hiking pathways, but it's been a while. But about a week before, so this probably happened, maybe 3 weeks ago now, and the week before, or a few days before, Keaton had texted me to say that he heard something outside of his place, and he looked out his bedroom window. This is before work, so early in the morning, and there was a bear right down there. And he doesn't keep his garbage in the garbage cans there, but he keeps his empty cans. Anyways, it had knocked over his garbage can, and because he smelled something. And so Keaton banged on the window, and the bear ran off down the hill. I had heard that there is a bear that the tiny house owner down here a little bit had seen in her yard. But so when I came out to help him clean up, I realized that bear had gotten into my garbage, because I was leaving my big garbage can with a latching lid outside in front of my shed. And I take my garbage in every 2 weeks, sometimes more frequently, but it had gotten into my garbage. And so I had to clean up my garbage and then make room in my shed to put my can in the shed now. It's an adolescent black bear. He was looking for something yummy. And so Yogi thought, hey, this smells good around here. So obviously we have to be careful now, because he's out and about. And we don't want him to become a problem, because then it becomes a problem for him. And that's not what we want, right? So that was fine. I think it was like 3 or 4 days later. In the mornings, I have my coffee out on my front step. And I was getting my coffee ready to go, and I heard something on this side of the house. And there's a lot of brush on this side of the house, the back side I call it, even though it's not the back, but the business side of the house. And I looked out and I couldn't see anything. And often, even just birds rustling in there, looking for whatever, food, it can sound like there's somebody walking back there. So I thought it was a bird. I didn't see anything. So I finished getting my coffee, and I turn around and I look out this window, and I see that black bear just walking up here, like right in front of my house. So I had already been out to water my plants. So I go to my front door and I bang, bang, bang on the door to try and scare him away. Well, when I came in from watering my plants, I hadn't latched my door properly, and my door swings outwards. So I bang, bang, bang on the door, and the door swings open. And there's the bear just before the first of my steps. I think he's going to go to the garden area where there's, tomatoes and such. But luckily I had scared him by banging. So by the time it swung open and I went to grab it and looked out, he had already turned away and was kind of starting to turn. Note to self, before you get all brave and cocky, make sure your door is latched. Do you know what I really regret? That I didn't film the thing. If I had just been a good YouTuber, I would have gotten my phone out and filmed him. I just didn't want him to come up on the step. I didn't want him to sort of push against the little fence that I've built keep the deer out of the garden. So I wanted to scare him away, but yeah, that was exciting. But that's the first time I've seen a bear in this area, in the park. I've seen them multiple times on the road in and out of this area and such. They're certainly around. But that's one of the things I love about this area. We are living in the middle of an area where wildlife lives. And honestly, I'm a lot less afraid of a bear or even a cougar than I am of a lot of humans. Cougars, they're not going to bother you, right? The cougar you see is not the one you need to worry about, but anyways, it's the one you don't see. And if they're after something, it's the chickens, it might be small dogs. They're usually very wary of humans. They usually don't come anywhere near. They may, like I say, attack small dogs on trails if they see them as easy prey, but they're very unlikely to attack a human. And so are bears, let's face it. Grizzlies can be a bit more aggressive, but black bears, even brown bears, if you don't have anything that is enticing for them, they're not going to be around. Yogi's not been around since. While it was exciting, it wasn't scary. And for the next couple of days, as I sat on my front step, every little sound, I was like, is that the bear going to walk around the corner? But he wasn't coming around. And it's been kind of fun, actually, to have a story to tell. So living in the tiny house for the last 7 years has been a blessing. It feels like home. It felt like home as soon as I moved in. It's always felt safe. It's always felt like sanctuary. I called her Serendipity because it's as if she was meant to be mine. I was meant to be here. And even in the process of planning and building and such, everything sort of just happened the right way, the way it was supposed to be. Everything was kind of serendipitous. Even down to the first deposit I needed to put down to start the process was the $5,000 design deposit. All of these deposits went towards the purchase of the house. But that $5,000 was that. And it came to me very serendipitous because a property that my mom and her siblings owned in Portugal got sold. It was just a little piece of land in a rural area. And it got divided up amongst the siblings or their kids. And so my brother and my sister and I each got, as our portion of her portion, $5,000. Exactly $5,000 Canadian is what I ended up with. And that became my design deposit. And that was just one of the sort of serendipitous events and things that happened. And so that's why she's called Serendipity. I can't imagine living anywhere else. I won't say I never will. If I buy a property, maybe Serendipity becomes Keaton's house and I build something else. I would love to build a little log house, a little log cabin. Like there's something very cozy about this space. When I'm laying in my bedroom, I can see my front door. I like that. It feels very safe for me. I've never felt unsafe living here. And in every other house that I've lived in, there have been moments where I felt unsafe, right? You hear a sound, you're not sure where it is. Is it downstairs? Is it in the basement? Is there somebody, whatever. I've never felt that here. Even living in the city, I've never felt that here. And certainly she belongs in a space like this. She belongs nestled, tucked into the trees. The maple trees that are on this side of the house grow over the house and shade the house, and they poke out on this side. I'm very, very fortunate. And I know that I am very, very fortunate to have been able to make this dream come true, to have been able to find such a wonderful place to live around amazing people. I'm very, very fortunate. And I don't take it for granted. Sometimes I need to remind myself to remember, to appreciate what I've got. When you get caught up in the minutia of the day and the stresses of life. Then I go sit outside or I go for a walk along the ocean and I go, oh, yeah, this is why. I just wanted to reminisce about the day that we brought her home and, what it's been like to live in my tiny house on wheels with you guys. Because so many of you have actually been here since practically then, because I've been on YouTube for that same length of time. I started the YouTube channel to share my sort of journey, but also as a video journal of everything of my life, so I could capture it and have it and look back on it, and also for my kids to look back on it and see their mom looking very young when I look at those pictures from the first year. And also because I kept getting the same questions over and over again about what it was like to live in a tiny house, how did I build it, what did it cost, all of that stuff. And there's a lot of videos on the channel now, and there's playlists. There's a Tiny House 101 playlist that will give you a lot of information if you're curious about it. I did a whole series on getting your tiny house ready to move. There's 3 videos on that I think are really useful. I wish I had that information before I moved my tiny house, got it ready to move and such. So I think that there's a lot of information that will help you if this is something that you want to do, if this is your dream. Hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're staying safe. Remember, in a world where you can be anything, be kind, including to yourself. I love you, and I'll see you next time.